Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very special webinar, Does Education Need Evolution or Revolution? An event sponsored by NuVu, the Innovation School. My name is Rona McLeod, and I'm a broadcaster and a journalist, and I'll be chairing the discussion. Perhaps more importantly, I have two daughters, aged 18 and 17, and so first-hand experience of the current education system here in Scotland over the past 13 years or so. Of course, the last 10 months or so have been like no other in the world of education. So, is it time for a rethink? Undoubtedly, every single one of you will have mused, is there a better way? Without doubt, challenges create opportunity. It forces us all to reanalyze the business landscape and educational environment to find new solutions, and from this, new ideas can emerge. Extremely topical is the question how we evaluate pupil and student performance without exams. COVID-19 has created the perfect storm for schools and their leadership teams to navigate. So, does education need evolution or revolution? Well, we have an excellent panel from different parts of the education and business spectrum ready to discuss, followed by a question and answer session. So please get your questions ready and join in the conversation. If you have a question that you'd like the panel to discuss, we'd ask that you type and submit your question using Zoom's Q&A feature, which can be found on the bottom bar of your Zoom window. Audience questions will be addressed in the second half of the webinar. Now then, to introduce our panel from the world of education, please welcome Dan Wyatt, head at Kelvinside Academy, which has both a junior and senior school based in Glasgow, Scotland. Hello there, Dan.
Hello, everybody.
Now we have Ian Munro, head at Dollar Academy, which sits in central Scotland. Dollar has pupils from primary and secondary ages, but is also a boarding school with pupils from both the UK and overseas. Hi there, Ian.
Hi, Rona. Thanks very much for having me here.
Now let's turn to Darren Hankey, principal at Hartlepool Further Education College, which is in northeast England. As a further education college, Darren and his team provide a wide variety of professional, technical and vocational qualifications in areas such as engineering, health and construction, as well as being one of the leading apprenticeship providers in the country. Hi, Darren.
Hello, Rona, and hello, everybody.
Now we have Saba, Ghole, Chief Executive Officer at NuVu Innovation School, which is based in Boston, Massachusetts, USA, but which also has a range of educational partnerships around the world. Hi, Saba.
Rona and everyone joining us.
Now they're joined by, from the world of business, by Donald Wilson, CEO at Barclay Gilmour Investments and Chair of Kelvinside Academy Governors. Hi, Donald.
Hello, Rona. Hello, everybody.
And then Selma Hunter, engineer, businesswoman and chair of Engineering Skills and Leadership Scotland. Hi there, Selma.
Hello, Rona. Hello, everyone there.
So let's get started. And my first question is to Ian. Ian, our theme today is, does education need evolution or revolution? Where do you stand on this? What would you like to, what do you like, first of all, about the current system? And what would you like to change and why?
Well, I wonder if sometimes this becomes a bit of a kind of binary debate, because at one side you've got people who think the education system is broken, it's kaput, it's fundamentally flawed, and they're calling for a rapid revolution. And then the other side, you've got people who think, well, actually it's kind of fit for purpose, it does an okay job, and trying to do anything else would just be far too difficult. You know, how could we do that? I'm not actually sure either of those viewpoints are particularly constructive, and I would certainly be calling for evolution in education. Great things happen in our schools every day. We create informal spaces for social development, we deliver excellent pastoral care, we put on clubs and activities where people can develop new passions and talents. And crucially, our pupils learn stuff through traditional courses like Highers and A-levels, and that's a good thing. However, is there space for more interdisciplinary learning? Is there space for more pupil-led learning? Could we be co-creating new curriculum content directly with industry and academia? I think we certainly could. And finally, I think in the UK and in Scotland, we have an unhealthy obsession with the traditional assessment framework, with exams. And we need to move on from that. I become so frustrated listening to some of the conversations in the UK about, how would we even think about assessing children differently? When you look to organizations like NuVu in the States, who for years have been using different assessment metrics very effectively. So is the system completely broken? No, I don't think it is at all. And we need to be really cautious about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But is it time for evolution? I think it is.
Talk about an unhealthy relationship. I certainly still have nightmares about my higher maths. That's a journalist speaking, so I'm not sure how much I'm using it. Now, Darren, you operate in a different and extremely broad part of the education ecosystem, working with school-age students, young adults on advanced learning, and also apprenticeships. Where would you like to see education going, and what do you think can be done to improve outcomes?
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I'd probably largely agree with Ian, but also I'd say from an English further education college perspective as well, probably a period of calm reflection to sort of see, what it is that we want to do. Just a bit of context of that. In 1992, so nearly 30 years ago, English colleges were incorporated. That means they were cut free from the local authority control and were pretty much standalone institutions. But in that time, we've had 15 government reviews, 15 white papers, including one that was released last week called Skills for Jobs, 5 acts of parliament, 7 different government departments overseeing further education in England, and 30 junior ministers. The curriculum's changed a lot in that time as well. I can't go through all of those in the last 30 years, but probably the most notable ones are apprenticeships in 2017, which saw bigger firms being levied and taxed to afford apprenticeship provision, but then also as well making apprenticeships a little bit more academic with an endpoint assessment at the end of those. For our school leavers, the government is currently consulting on having 3 routes: A-level, and this is the equivalent of obviously the highs in Scotland, A-level, T-level and apprenticeships. So I would say that change has been a constant. We've had lots of evolution in the English further education system. The only thing I would say, sort of partially agreeing with Ian, is that there are probably opportunities to do things better, but we really need to think of the impact on young people in particular. So the changes to apprenticeships that I mentioned before has witnessed a big decline in firms taking on younger apprentices, so school leavers. So we need to be mindful of that. And similarly with the T-levels, which I broadly agree with the direction of travel there, but what is going to be a part of the T-levels is a 9-week, 45-day work placement. And I just worry that some parts of the economy and some firms in those parts of the economy, and Hartlepool is probably one of those, we just won't have the firms to be able to sustain that. So I think a period of calm reflection and try and answer the question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve?
Well, let's indeed have a look towards the working world. Selma, you come from the world of business and you're Chair of Engineering Skills and Leadership Scotland. And you'll have worked with a lot of young people in your various roles. In your eyes, how well prepared are they when they come out of school, college or university into the workplace? And what are the areas or skills you'd like to see the education system develop?
Thanks, Rona. Yes, young people come out of education generally pretty knowledgeable and about their particular topics, and they're well educated in the technical aspects of it. There's generally a strong belief in what they know is the complete picture, and young people are generally quite versed in the digital environment, so they're very comfortable navigating around IT. And they're confident with the digital space altogether. But where there are sometimes challenges are when the situation is more ambiguous. The answer isn't necessarily straightforward or even right versus wrong, but needs some considered discussion and agreement on what is on balance the most probable or best way out. Now, especially in the engineering environment, that is particularly true. So this can land up with the young people with lack of confidence and also a lack of engagement and discussion because they don't feel confident in participating. And that then leads to confusion and indecision, and generally a lack of resilience in what this ambiguous environment can create. So it would be helpful if young people were also helped with the decision making in the face of ambiguity, and when they realize that they're making a decision with all the knowledge they have, but that generally doesn't mean that that's all the knowledge there is. And then they had the resilience in getting the way forward, but not, and then also if something doesn't turn out quite the way that they'd expected, that they have that resilience, that they can understand that although this wasn't the optimum way, it was a way and it just needs to be tweaked. So that's really my general observation and what I've been have fed back to me from other businesses as well.
Thank you. Well, Donald, I know that you wear two hats because you come from the world of business, but as Chair of Governors at Kelvinside Academy, you're also very close to the education process. Why is it that you are a voice for change within the system? Do you have concerns that if we don't move the education system forward, it's going to bounce back and kick us?
Hi, Rona. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that. So, as chairman of Governors of Kelvinside Academy, and someone with a business rather than educational background, I've been able to revisit a system that I've been away from for over 40 years. I've got an objective, but I've also got a business-orientated perspective. And to me, not much has really changed. Exam passes seem to be pretty much the be-all and end-all. Not just for pupils, but for their parents and for the schools. Pupil career development post-school, it certainly appears to them to depend largely on how they manage to perform at a single moment in time during their formative years. And I think Rona mentioned it earlier, what a lot of pressure, you have to pass a maths exam, believing that that's going to, be relevant for you for the rest of your days. Parents, obviously, they want the best for their children, and they believe this is going to improve if the exam passes are good. And the schools, schools nowadays, they are entirely assessed on academic performance. It's all about league tables, and it's nothing more than, how well the school has performed. And I think that is a very, very narrow focus. And we all know that that's not necessarily the way it works when you leave school. From own experience, in business, I know of many people who have excelled academically, and yet they've struggled out of school. I know others who have probably struggled, didn't get the exam passes, and yet have gone on to achieve great things, despite having to drag poor higher results with them for the rest of their working lives. So my key point to everyone today is that I believe in general the current system is too narrowly focused on purely academic achievement. I agree with Ian. I don't think, it needs to be, revolutionized, but I do think it does need to evolve for the modern world. I only have a very short time here. I've been strictly restricted here, but, by way of example, in my world, the big four accountancy firms, you used to have to get first-class honours, 2-1, or they wouldn't even look at your CV. One of them has recently worked out that it might not just all be about academic excellence, and they're now actually prepared to consider students who perhaps haven't performed particularly well academically. And the focus there is on having people that can come in with different skills. And the reason they haven't performed particularly well at school or at university is because they've been doing other things and they've been learning other skills. They've been relating with other people. So, they may be teamwork, leadership skills. And, so it's all very well having a firm full of academics if nobody can go out there and make a sale and relate to people. So turning to the second point of the question, Rona, my concern is if we don't move the education system forward, we run a real risk that we do not maximize the potential of all the young people within our education system. And that's a really important point. It's a general point. The system works for a lot of children, but it does leave a lot of kids behind. And that's why we have introduced a NuVu model at Kelvinside Academy. We want all our children to be the best that they can be and to be properly equipped with the modern tools to survive and thrive in today's very challenging world. Happy to expand on that later if anyone would like to.
Well, let's hear a bit more about the NuVu approach from Saba. The approach to educating pupils is very different. Young people are challenged by hands-on design, engineering, science, technology, art, and more. And they use their curiosity and creativity to collaborate and explore new ideas. They make their concepts come to life. Can you tell me why you take the approach you do and how that model is being used in different schools?
Yeah, thank you, Rona. When we started NuVu 10 years ago, our core mission was really focused on tapping into and elevating students' creative potential. And we really believe that all learning should be, and very well can be, connected to the real world, so it's purposeful for students. And at NuVu, students are working in a studio-based environment where they're looking at open-ended problems. They're immersed in research, they're developing ideas, they're working collaboratively, they're developing projects that connect across discipline and knowledge areas. And by really being engaged in this type of learning all day, every day, and not just a portion of the weeks, students are not just developing this powerful skill set, which is based around problem solving and creative skills, but they're starting to really understand the complex world around them in a meaningful way. They're learning about perspectives that are different than their own, opposing viewpoints. Selma mentioned this, how do you reconcile different ways that people are approaching a problem? And they're also learning how to use technology in the service of their ideas and also the ethical impacts of those technology. So for example, this past fall, our students were collaborating with an architecture firm, the Smith Group, and they were designing architectural interventions in the city of Boston on the Black Heritage Trail as a better way to understand the history of the site through the lens of Black history. And so students, you can see, are looking at relevant issues and learning in a deeper way that connects to the place in which they live, which I think is a really powerful way and model of learning. And to address the second part of your question, our studio-based model is now being used in schools around the world. And we work as partners with schools to really adapt that model to work in different settings. So it could be a fully immersive semester-long program, but it could also be individual studios that are woven into the schedule with other courses of math and biology and history. So we're taking more of that revolutionary model that we have in Boston, a school that's really built on the studio model, and we're adapting it and creating more of these evolutionary versions of the model within schools.
So I'm interested to hear how it's going in Scotland then. Dan Wyatt, head of Kelvinside Academy, you've opened a NuVu Innovation School in Glasgow. Can you tell us why you did this and what sort of impact it's having on the pupils and the school in general?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Rona. We've had a huge level of engagement from both industry, commerce, and wider business communities around Glasgow. We've seen a real interest from the parent group that are looking at independent education in Glasgow, and we have really made a differentiator with the other schools in the area. We've had visitors from groups as diverse as major companies like Balfour Beatty, with Hector Macaulay, Ken Brown, and Steve Petrie at the top of that company, showing real interest in the innovation school. We've had multiple visits and staff training delivered to Peak Scientific, Scottish Exporters of the Year 2020, and the Malcolm Group. And we've engaged with much smaller companies too, Kickstarter companies like Potter Pots, who have a brilliant story, which I would encourage everybody to have a look at in terms of the innovative approach to business that they've come up with. In terms of our parents, they look at the skills-based offering which we now can offer thanks to NuVu, and they just love the pedagogy and the dynamic of learning that we have truly changed at the school. Often visitors will come to look around and say to me, can I come back to school? I'd have loved this if I'd been able to study this when I was at school. So I would say doing, making, iterating, and delivering really does make for a game changer in terms of the educational experience that children have. I think every parent would want their child to be happy and confident. And I think truly that NuVu helps to deliver that for us here at Kelvinside. In terms of the balance, the revolution and the evolution, I will stand a little bit further on wanting more of a revolution, because I see the benefits that our children are having with the NuVu education here at Kelvinside. So I'm all for change and I think it's time.
Well, Dan talking about his revolution there, often, of course, there can be reluctance to change. Let's not forget that the hire in Scotland began in 1888. It's gone through various revisions, but it's always essentially been a qualification for university entrance. So how much support is there for change within the educational ecosystem? What do you think the view is of teachers, lecturers and unions? Are they generally supportive of developing the education diet and the delivery model, or do they fear the change and what it might mean for them? I want to ask Ian that.
Thanks, Rona. I think it would be fair to say that the groups you mentioned there, teachers, lecturers and unions, they're pretty diverse. So to try and find a common viewpoint throughout all of them is probably, it's impossible, right? And you've got, people all over the place that will think different things. And reluctance to change, yep, I think we see all of that. We all see that in our lives. I get it with education, because education is about the future of youth. I mean, I think there's areas in life where you want to take risks. Will I wear a bright pair of socks today under my suit? Well, maybe, maybe not. Will I change a whole curriculum for young people and wreck their life chances? Well, that sounds a bit more risky. So I understand why some people might be reluctant to change. But equally, I think right now we need brave and informed school leadership at every level. Because I think particularly in Scotland and perhaps the UK, there's a real danger. We're falling behind other global education systems that are doing really great, exciting things. So, I mean, I come back, I know the question was about, what's the appetite for change? I come back to whether the appetite is variable or not. I think we need it. There are some great world performing systems out there that are doing well. And I suppose my hope would be tying that into the pandemic at the moment. If there's a silver lining of this on the education front, it is forcing people in Scotland to think about how we might build back better, or whatever you want to call it. And of course, we are now living in a world where we haven't had exams, for a while. We won't have exams this year, and we will find another way. So hopefully that might kind of leverage change and push it through, and hopefully that's not too uncomfortable for too many people.
Darren, would you agree that we're falling behind? Do you think that there's an appetite for change? And indeed, could this whole coronavirus epidemic be the catalyst for change?
Yeah, I mean, largely agree with what Ian says and the point you made earlier, Rona, about High's been around since 1888. I mean, Hartlepool College traces its origins back to 1849 with the West Hartlepool Mechanics Institute and Library. So, and obviously in that time, over 170 years, there's lots of changes sort of taken place. And I alluded to some more recent changes within the further education sector within England. So I think can all those, the teachers, the unions, as Ian said, they are a diverse group. But I think, we've got a long and well-established track record of changing it in the English education system and the Scottish education system, so people can deal with it. I think people might be a little bit more welcoming of change if it makes their job a little bit more effective and a little bit more efficient. And obviously one of the things we're talking about today is exams and no exams, and I'm sure England will follow Scotland's suit by not having exams this year. There is a bit of technology called No More Marking, and a wonderful woman called Daisy Christodoula. I don't know if people have heard of that, but that sounds like a really good way. This concept of comparative judgment could be a way forward. And I think if something like that came out, it could be easier not easier for the students, but more reliable, more valid for the students, easier workload for members of staff. I'm sure teachers and trade unions and other school leaders like myself will get behind something like that. So I think there is an appetite for a change, and I think if it makes people's lives easier, then it'd be more likely for that change to stick.
I just want to remind everybody that we're going to be having a question and answer coming up very soon. Please join in the conversation, and remember to submit your questions to us. We would be very happy to hear from you and put your questions to the panel. So now my question is for Selma and Donald, and this relates to the business world. How do you think that the business world views the need to change education? Are entrepreneurs and business leaders pushing for a different approach, Selma?
Yes, I would say there are very positive things in the education system, and the youngsters come out with you know, a good background. But in the business world, I would like to encourage young people to be more business savvy. So for their education, it would be very valuable if they understood the basics of where money comes from. So it's again into that ambiguity of decision making that some of the things we've been talking about this afternoon is definitely coming into its own. So they need to understand where is the revenue coming from, where's the cost coming from, and what is actually meant by profit. So culturally in the UK, I think people aren't really that comfortable with the fundamentals of business, including marketing and the sales. I think that's been mentioned as well, especially in a technical environment. So there's this perception that you're either a technical person, or you're a marketing person, or you're a sales person. And I think you know, the NuVu X model has shown how you can actually have that all working together. So currently the focus is pretty much on the technical and academic knowledge, and that general knowledge of the putting all together, that would be extremely valuable when you come into the business world.
Donald, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the question, Rona, you know, does the business world view the need to change education? My kind of experience is that the business world doesn't really get it yet. You know, I don't think so, because the problem is they've all come through the system. So they don't really have a view on what alternative might be available to them. You know, and you know, looping back to what Dan said, the kind of response we've had from the business world when we introduced the NuVu concept to them has been staggering, because once they realize what we are capable of producing from the school through the NuVu model, they get it. So, you know, we've got one particular company that we're one of the director owners is on our board of governors. And we've been lucky enough to have some insight from her and her chief executive. And the words that he was using when he spoke to us were, you know, they're looking for people that come in who have creativity, they've got their initiative, they've got innovative skills, they've got influencing skills, they know how to work in teams, you know, they know how to fail, they've maybe been given a job or a process and they're able to influence that process and change it. School doesn't really prepare people for that, I don't think. So I'm not entirely sure the business world has got this yet. And I think that is one of our challenges. That's why I'm so pleased to see everybody on today's webinar, because it really is an education process, that there is a different way of training our children and giving them a different skill set. And it's not just for the business world, it's for the individuals. You know, at the moment, if you're a 31-year-old pilot and you've just lost your job, what skill do you draw on to change and pivot direction in your career? You know, it's very difficult to go back into your algebra or your Latin, but if you've got a NuVu skill, how you solve problems, it certainly does give that individual quite an advantage. That's what the sort of message we're trying to get across, I think. And my conclusion would be, I'm not entirely sure the business world has got this yet.
I suppose, yeah, exactly as you say, we all draw from our own experiences, and you know, whether we did 3, 4, 5 hires or whatever, that's all we know. So yeah, I'm interested to hear about the reaction of businesses to the innovation school at Kelvinside and Boston. So to Saba and to Dan, when business people visit, have they shown an interest? Has it changed also the potential parents' view of the school? Saba.
Yeah, I would say that there's 2 primary ways that come to mind in terms of how businesses connect to NuVu. One has been definitely through the studios themselves and the studio topics and direct work where we're doing with local businesses around issues that they're facing, local organizations, sometimes the city of Boston or the city of Cambridge. So for instance, we did a studio that was called Deployable Street Life, where students were working with small businesses in the neighborhood to design these street side guerrilla marketing efforts in the backdrop of the growth of larger chain stores. So how do you preserve culture in the neighborhood? And they were also working with the city of Cambridge to design these accessible play art pieces in a new park that's being designed. So that's, I think, one way is that through those studios. The second way, which has been businesses really acknowledging that our students have a skill set that makes them work ready, that they're can be involved, and they are involved in internships where they're working directly with companies. And we had a company in the Boston area that was looking at the future of healthcare products. So they had employed 4 of our students who worked collaboratively in the team to develop different prototypes and 3D printed health-based products for this major telecom company. And they were, they had already those skills in terms of how to work in a team setting, how to work iteratively, involved in these open-ended problems that they just seamlessly fit into the team. And so I think that's really, really crucial. So it's really through this more direct business engagement that I see our students engaging with that, with the world.
So the young people seem to be better prepared going into the business world. What about the parents, Dan? How has it changed their thoughts? People send their kids to schools hoping that they're going to do very well academically, and then you've got this whole new concept to tell them about. How do the parents respond?
They love the iterative process and the open-ended challenge of studios. I talked earlier about happiness and confidence, and really, if we think about emotional intelligence, the pupils can get a huge amount through the work that they do, because they're doing and really owning their learning as they do it. Their emotional intelligence is greatly benefited by that. Another thing that I love is that at the end of a studio, pupils do a presentation and they open up to question and answer. And the resilience that young people can show to challenging questions is a really important aspect of the studio as well. And I just think, again, when I said that parents said, I'd love to do this myself, they actually see the relevance of the learning in school to the world of business and industry out in the real world. And they see that life is about iterative processes. It is about failing and learning through failure. So yeah, the overwhelming response is really positive.
Now to our final question, which we're moving along pretty swiftly here, but I'd like you all to be fairly brief with this answer, although it's a really big topic, and it's exams. What is the best way to evaluate a pupil or student's capabilities, application and performance? Do we stick with it about being the exam grade, or do we look to evaluate more about the pupil and how they've engaged and progressed as well as the exam grade? I'll go to Ian first of all.
It's a big question. Personally, I think we need to look beyond exam grades. And I think, as I've mentioned before, there are other models of monitoring or measuring a young person's performance and development. And there people on this call and in the audience will be familiar with things like skill-based or competency-based approaches, and there's lots of debate over what's a skill or what's a competency. But I think we can start as educators to put together frameworks that allow a consistent approach to measuring young people's ability in a different way to ABC, whether that's creativity, initiative, whatever matrix you come up with. I think there are other ways to do it. And I wonder if central to these alternate systems is a kind of a culture of high teacher trust and backing our educators and funding teacher training properly and making sure we've got a really great teacher workforce who are not only skilled up enough and talented enough to make these judgments, but also that they're empowered by the national systems to do that. And again, silver lining, we're seeing more of that now. We're seeing teachers having to estimate grades, and that's really tough. That's a real biggie for the profession. And I know it's hard, but I wonder if it might just turn out to be a good thing.
Well, Ian, stick with us because we now go to our question and answers from the audience, answers from you, questions from them. The first question is for you, and it is absolutely relevant to what you're saying here. No more marking is a good theoretical approach. However, could consistency be ensured across Scotland if this was to become the main way of judging student progress?
Okay, so so no more marking, as I understand it, is the work that Darren referenced, and this is by Daisy down south, and this is all about comparative judgments, and the basic premise of that is teachers are maybe quite bad at making absolute judgments, A, B, C, but they're quite good at looking at different pieces of work and saying, well, you know, Saba's work is better than Ian's, and Ian's is a wee bit better than Rona's. So no more marking is one example of an alternate system, and it will have backers and followers, and it'll have people who are against it. I mean, I keep coming back to there are other models. You know, the way NuVu assess work with their students through the portfolio approach. I mean, I think that's great, and I'm an advocate of it. But I suppose, you know, the question is about consistency, and that's a training piece, and that's a funding piece, and it's making sure your workforce, wherever it is, understands the standards, and dare I say it, they probably, you know, have a role to play in helping create the standards. So then again, they feel more empowered to deliver them.
You talked about the consistency there, but is there a danger also of bias?
Well, that's, you know, I mean, I've mentioned the word trust before. I mean, that comes down to trust in the teaching profession and the nation's trust in it. I mean, at the moment, I don't know what the levels of trust are, but teachers are responsible for delivering grades. I mean, for those who look from the outside in and worry about that, I think we have to remember that we have courses already throughout the country where there's a lot of internal assessment, or whatever you want to call it, where teachers have already got a bit of flex in what grades people get at the end. So yeah, I mean, there will be issues of trust, and there's worry around how teachers might apply judgments, but there's also worry around to what extent exams do the right thing for kids and ask the right questions and get, you know, interesting answers. So maybe it's a kind of balance of harms approach.
Thank you. A question here for Dan. How can we empower our secondary school practitioners to be bold and to introduce new pedagogical, I've never come across this word until today, approaches when the current system focuses so heavily on senior phase exams?
So, yeah, a great question. Thank you for the question. I would say first and foremost, it does come down to training, that with training comes confidence, and people need to see things in action, which is where my partnership with NuVu has been so beneficial to Kelvinside Academy, because we have an established delivery that we could trust and rely upon that came across to Glasgow and we could embed in our school here. Our staff can then see it and can be trained in how to deliver the pedagogies that are required, and that will grow the confidence and then allow people to be able to deliver it in their own schools too. So I would say some demonstration, some understanding, some modeling, but also fundamentally it is about training. So whilst we say revolution and we think of revolution as something that happens this moment and now, the revolution starts now and will be obviously months or years in the making.
Another question from the audience: how many partners do you feel is necessary to co-create this new curriculum? Did you also involve parents and pupils in this co-creation? This is a question for Saba and for Dan. Saba, do you want to go first?
Yeah, happy to. In terms of how we approach curriculum development, it definitely involves a team of people, that team of coaches, as we call, who are instructors, and they come from different backgrounds. Some are architects, some are come from a history background, some are engineers. And we also, as I mentioned, if we're incorporating, collaborating with outside organizations and partners, they're also part and parcel of that curriculum design in terms of figuring out what that topic is. So that's a key part of looking at the world and also trying to involve different players in as we're defining that topic. And students have a lot of once the studio is in action, students themselves have a lot of agency in coming up with their own projects and their perspective and their ideas. So they're a key component of driving their own projects forward. And every now and then we do also get parents that are involved. They have organizations that they're involved in, and they want to bring those organizations into the scope of some of the studio work that's happening at NuVu. So we try and keep a pretty open platform for looking at different partnerships and ways in which students can be exploring topics of importance.
Dan, how many partners do you think that you're going to need to stage this revolution?
Well, for me, we're already involved in the revolution thanks to NuVu themselves. In terms of how we then reach out to our local organisations, we've linked in with local care homes, for example, a local care home near the school, Balmano House, where we've worked with the elderly residents and worked through studios with them. And that's an incredibly powerful and enriching experience for our young people.
This is for Darren and for Selma. With a perceived lack of investment in high quality and meaningful training for educators that stretches vision, how do we inspire a critical mass of educators towards the opportunities within transformational change? Darren, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of investment is the key thing, certainly down here in England, and certainly with the further education system. There's some recent work out that basically said that the funding for further education colleges in England is only about 10% more in real terms than it was back in 1990, and obviously that's not sustainable. I think what that leads people like me to do, and the wonderful staff at Hartlepool College and colleges across England, is just try to be innovative in what we do, and it's interesting listening to the conversations today. A lot of our curriculum again is in sort of practical subjects like engineering, health and construction, where there is project work, there is course work, but there's also 1 or 2 exams as well. And you know, we work with hundreds of employees across Hartlepool, the Tees Valley and the wider northeast, and very much like the feedback that Dan gave, they very much like the work that we do. But yeah, obviously the investment helps, but all it's doing at the moment is just making us try and be even more innovative with what we do. But as I said in my first point, you know, fundamentally we've got to think of the impact on the young people, because I think in the English system we would offer probably about 18 hours of further education study a week, and if we look you look at places like Holland and Germany and Austria, they're getting 25 to 30, maybe even 35 hours a week. So ultimately that lack of investment is potentially letting our young people down.
Selma, would you agree with that?
Yes, I partly agree, but I also think there's maybe the opportunity to bring the business world into helping with that vision. And you know, I like the idea of maybe a portion of a week or a bit of a month of the education, be it for schools, further education or higher education, where businesses actually have a chance to explain and talk and put the vision of what could be achieved, or what they would be appreciating if it came out, or indeed just do a little bit of that roundedness of the education. So you know, there's ideas if we've got the will, and there's lots of very passionate people that would ideally like to help. So I think it's maybe getting that handshake to happen maybe a little bit more, which obviously things like we're doing at the moment is hopefully inspiring some connections there.
Another question from the audience here, and it seems that some inspiring has already been going on. If this is a question for Saba, if you wanted to be a teacher or coach in NuVu, what type of qualifications would you need in order to apply? Is there a specific degree you look for as a base, or is it about being able to demonstrate your own creative and innovative nature?
Yeah, I mean, I think at Boston, we have a big diverse team, and I think that's very crucial to our approach, that there's different perspectives, not only in the students, but in terms of the coaching and teaching staff. We have a lot of designers and architects and industrial designers who really understand the studio pedagogy, but we also have filmmakers, visual artists, engineers, programmers that are part of the team. And we're really looking for that desire to teach and be in an environment that's working in a creative space, that ability to be really flexible and nimble and collaborate. I think that's very crucial to the model in our teaching pedagogy. And we do have folks that come in that have also not taught in this sort of environment. So there is an extensive training process for coaches as they're coming into NuVu or even into our NuVu X programs, where they're really getting full immersion into the process of how do you lead studios in this sort of environment. And that's a multi-month process. And it's a hands-on experiential based training, which is, I think, very crucial in this sort of environment.
Well, somebody in our audience is interested in the starting point. This is a question for Dan. Where did you start in introducing a skills-based offering in Kelvinside?
So the journey is a really interesting one, and we started actually with summer camps where we invited NuVu to come across and to run some summer camps with us. And so impressed were we with the outcomes of those summer camps that's when we then developed the communication and partnership. And we were then able to invite a fellow to come over to have a temporary space that we'd created in the school to run studios. And from there, we've built our innovation school. So I'll be happy to talk to individuals outside of this webinar around that. But it really started with summer camps and it moved on from there into a full curriculum offering. Apologies for dropping off earlier. I was just going to mention some partnerships and interest. And I think the importance of higher education, and particularly for our context in Glasgow, with the Glasgow School of Art, Glasgow University and Strathclyde University, have been really important. And I do think they play a key part in maybe moving this forwards as well.
Now, time for one more question in our question and answer section. And this is for Ian. How do you get over the challenge that secondary education is so transactional? Is that what that says? Transactional, where in spite of enthusiasm for interesting teaching methodology, our pupils are fundamentally focused on gaining access to university courses. This has been a big one in our household. So, Ian, how do you answer that one, both from the students and the parents?
Okay, so from the student perspective, I can talk to a project that we've done here at Dollar this year, which is where we created some non-certified courses with the team at NuVu around sustainability and fashion and design for well-being, which was an architecture course. And we made them open source and we put them online. So these are, the transactional bit in that is there's no grade at the end of it. It's just, put it out there and will people do it? And people will do it. So I get it's transactional, but there is a love of learning out there in some who will do that anyway. So that's, kind of batting that back a wee bit. I do, however, accept that for heaps and heaps and heaps of young people, it is transactional and they're looking for currency. What can I get at school to get the next steps? Now, I actually firmly agree with what Dan just referenced there. And this is including universities and employers in this conversation. It's an area I've been working in a wee bit too, and certainly the conversations I've had with Russell Group unis in some Russell Group unis in the UK, they're very open to exploring alternate certification and entrance pathways. And there's many angles to that. One of them is actually the equity and widening access piece, and making sure that there are lots of routes for lots of different people from different backgrounds who maybe cannot access exams, advanced hires, A-levels in the same way. So the transactional thing, that currency question, I understand why we keep coming back to it, and I think we need to talk to the people on that next step. And help them understand what we're trying to do as schools and as a sector, and get them on board. Because there is a kind of argument that we go with grades and UCAS forms because it's an easy way to administer it, and I wonder if that ease of administration is becoming less palatable, and rightly so, in today's world. And I wonder if employers and universities will have to widen their selection metrics.
So much still to talk about. I'd like to thank our panel and indeed our audience, all of you, for your involvement with us today. I would now like to introduce Emily Glass from NuVu, our sponsors. Emily is based in Boston and is the director of the NuVu X program, which brings the NuVu partnership model to educational establishments, not just in the USA, but around the world. Emily, would you like to tell the audience a little more about NuVu X and how it works?
Hi, thank you, Rona. Yes, absolutely. So NuVu X is the partnership wing of NuVu Studio. We were started just over 5 years ago as an initiative to help schools and organizations around the world create design and innovation programs for their students within their own organizations. So in the before times, before COVID, lots of schools and educational leaders came to visit NuVu every year, and they were always looking for ways to how to incorporate something similar to what we do into their own organizations. So NuVu X was established to help them support these initiatives at their own primary and secondary school institutions. So today, NuVu X has evolved to include a range of program implementation methods that we call X1 through X4. And they range in intensity of engagement from curriculum all the way to a full-time staff member on site. The benefits are really wide-ranging, from custom solutions for each program to organization-wide support to reach long-term goals around innovative educational programming. So through our studios, as Saba kind of described earlier, we try to prepare students with the skills they'll need for their futures, both in work and in life. We're trying to build confidence and creativity through engaging in these real world issues and helping students realize the impact that they're able to have in their own communities. So if you're interested in learning more, please visit our website. I think there's going to be a link in the chat to the NuVu X program offerings, and please feel free to be in touch with us in the future.
Thank you very much, Emily. Well, that concludes today's webinar, but we will be back in late February for another event as we continue to talk through other aspects of education. So look out for this event details, and we hope to see you there. It just remains for me to thank the audience for attending today's event. We hope you found it useful and stimulating, and I would also like to thank our panel for their time, their valuable insights and contributions. We hope to welcome you back again to future discussions, and we continue to debate this important topic. Now, one final piece of housekeeping is that it would be very useful for us to have your feedback from today's event, and we'll be emailing a short feedback form to those of you who have attended today. We'd be grateful if you'd spend a few minutes to provide us with your thoughts. There will also be a recording of the debate available in a few days, and if you'd like a copy of this to share with colleagues, then please get in touch and we will have it sent to you. Now, all that remains for me to do is to say thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that we will see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.